mainstream church to, we're like, no, that's not ministry. They're not ordained to do that because that's not how we would do it. Go about it, you know. And I've been in the churches, and they would say, well, what he should have done is ask him if he believes in Jesus Christ as his personal Savior. Like, oh, fuck me. You know? Right. No, I know. That's why I said it's not in reference to you, but in both extremities of what I drew yesterday, that's the only way they're going to understand ministry, you know. So really, when we talk about ministries, how do we individually define that? And in my thought of what UAC has always been, it might be that we are that full spectrum, from as far right as possible to the far left as possible, with an understanding that neither end is wrong. We're just viewing things from a different angle, and we respect each other for it.
If I could draw perhaps a poor analogy to the question. We are the ones who've chosen to be the doctors and nurses of the soul. It's a term we don't use that often. Everyone has the potential of human kindness. Everyone has a potential of compassion. We have chosen to make that our main calling, and we have been trained and empowered to go ahead and do so. And we believe that there are specific gifts that we are entitled, authorized to give. Some deacons are going to get some of those powers today, and that's, you know, we're doing nothing more than what anyone can do. We've chosen to find a way of doing it in a context that others have chosen not to do. So.
If I may, please respond to your question. What makes that a ministry as opposed to just being a good person or good? I think it has to do with intentionality and with the awareness. People can go to church and say all the right words, but if they don't have that awareness of the presence of God, it's just some people in the church and saying all the right words. For me, I've been in situations where everybody's nice to each other. That's great. That's wonderful. We're friends. We do good things to each other, for each other. But when I get with my friends, I am aware that I am bringing the sacred, and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that what sacrament means? That you allow the sacred to come through? Because that was my understanding of the word. The difference between me and somebody just being nice is I'm going to accept these people no matter how screwed up they are, no matter how poor they are in spirit, no matter how messed up their lives are. I'm going to love them, I'm going to accept them, and I'm going to do that aware that we are all in the presence of God. I just become, I was a little bit wounded because just because I'm not currently able to administer the 7 sacraments does not make my ordination any less valid.
Right, well, I don't think I mentioned sacraments at all in my question.
But okay, the ministry.
Yeah, but I mean, so
But your question was why
the question was, is that, from my perspective, that at least the question, where is God in this, should be part of ministry. And you just mentioned consciousness of the presence of God, which to my thinking answers that question, right?
See, and
I'm wondering whether I'm hearing a difference between ministry with a big M and ministry with a small m. So, I mean, just help me, you know, because most of you here have the disadvantage of being clergy. I mean, benefit of being clergy. You're ministers. But you're talking about your uncle being a minister. And so, and Bishop's picture of the inoculation, is really, I think, about empowering big M ministers, capital M ministers, empowering those we touch to do little M ministry.
No.
No?
That's really so unfair, it's ridiculous.
Why?
Because I also use the analogy of a gas station. And we're filling up and fueling. What I'm hearing is you're saying, what I hear you saying is what I understand, to a certain extent, spiritual direction to be. And I don't think all ministry is spiritual direction. I think ministry is holding open space for God to do God's work. And that can be in any number of settings. I think asking where God is in this is spiritual direction, which is also ministry. But I don't think, and certainly my view when I drew that syringe was not that I was saying that what happens is the bishop, priest, and deacon are empowering people to do tiny, insignificant ministry. I think that's an issue within you that's there because of your history.
I wasn't saying tiny and insignificant. I'm questioning whether there's trying to distinguish here, the priesthood of all believers versus those who are ordained.
And I'm not hearing that in what Juby said at all.
Okay, well,
I think you've called me out. I mean, my training is in spiritual direction on some level, and that's a bias of mine. So I may be betraying bias in that. And I wasn't necessarily saying it needed to be explicit. It just seems to me that from my perspective, that's kind of an underlying assumption for me.
Right.
I was hearing some stuff that gave me the impression that intentionality had a lot to do with it, and that makes me kind of gag. If it's the same action and it has the same outcome, God's probably a part of it anyway. Like the nice people, if the nice people will unconditionally take anybody and work with them too, why can't that be ministry?
Right. This is a rhetorical question. Is whether or not it's ministry based on something in the minister or the one ministered to? And to me it seems like it's at least equal. At least. And maybe, if I'm the one being ministered to, whether anybody's aware of it or not, and I find the action to be ministry to me, I've been ministered to. I think. At least in my mind, no.
Except Judy's question was, what makes it a ministry as opposed to just being a genuine nice person?
Right, and
my response to that was a conscious awareness.
Right, and I think intentionality, it's interesting because it takes a fair amount of intentionality to go across the street and smuggle something into a Mexican hospital, apparently. You can't just off the cuff. He had to think about, how am I going to get this in? How am I going to get him not to check my pocket? I was hit with a briefcase. There's more intentionality to that than some people use in celebrating the Eucharist.
Yeah, most of you guys know who Bishop Pearson is, Carlton Pearson. And sorry.
He doesn't watch my stuff.
Oh, that's right. His ministry is to make people feel good for the half hour that they get. And some people need that. They may be superficial people, but they need that, I can't take that away from him. I've asked him about it, I'm like, it's a hand job only goes so far, man. And he didn't understand, so I had to explain it to him graphically. And it's hard. It really is, because for us, because we're at least this aware, we need something specific so that we can hook onto it, right? Peggy was asking me, what's my home church? And I'm like, I don't have one. Well, why not? I'm like, well, it's a little bit difficult, but I can't go to a church in where the minister is, happy clappy time. I'm just like, oh God, this chokes the life out of me. But then I can't go to a church in where, after church we're going to this rally, then we're going to go to this activist protest, and then, oh, that's not it either. And so I don't feel that I'm being ministered to, though everybody else in the room may feel the presence of God. I don't. But yet I'll walk outside and some homeless guy talking to himself will walk by, and what the hell are you looking at? Shit, you're the one looking at me, and boom, there's God.
Well, right, and I think,
and
I don't want to give anyone the impression that I think it needs to look a
right,
specific
no.
way.
No,
it's not at all.
Right.
But I think I like what Bishop said, even though I can't remember it.
About how the spiritual direction thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're ultimate to the spiritual direction. Because I'm coming from this, because I admit, I have bias. Like everybody has biases. Like you bring your bias with you, and so my bias is spiritual direction. So that's what caught me. That's what raised the question for me in the first place, right? But you talked about, something about opportunity for God to do God's work.
Oh yeah, holding open the space to allow God to do God's work. Yeah.
So now that, for me, that's a much better definition than mine, right? Because that acknowledges that it's God doing the work and not me, which is ultimately really what I think.
And it still
is
tips.
True.
It still tips though to spiritual direction, because spiritual direction is holding open the space for transformation to occur. So I think there's a relation and an overlap.
Yeah. No. I think your definition contains mine, but it's broader. Right. That's what I'm saying.
And what you just said about, why don't you have a home church and out on the street, speaks to ministry being defined perhaps by the person who is being ministered to.
Right.
So, I can do the best, in my mind, ministry in the world, and if somebody looks at me and goes, meh, nothing happened, right? So
there was a trend that this guy that I worked with, he was Land King as well, noticed that nothing violent would ever happen when we were in the neighborhood. It was hot summer, 6, 7 o'clock in the afternoon where shootings usually happen. And we'd be on the corner with all the guys and nothing would ever happen. We'd hop in the car, go around the corner, and pop, 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 pop. Damn, we just missed that. Rip right back around. What happened? Oh, as soon as you guys left, someone drove through and shot. Oh, that's crazy. Stick around a little bit longer. All right, where are we gonna go? We're gonna go get something. Hop in the car. We get to the restaurant 5 blocks away. Phone goes off. Hey man, they just came through again. I'm like, damn.
You gotta sit there the whole time.
Right. But that's what ended up happening, because it became such a pattern that the drug dealer
Put blow-up dolls in the car.
right. The drug dealer in the area said, he goes, hey man, y'all can never leave the block, man. Y'all gotta stay out here because people get shot when you're not. And it's funny, but the one guy that had served as my bodyguard, he had been in prison for 15 years for murder, very well known and respected in the whole bit, and he's just like, fuck church, fuck ministers, fuck the Bible, who knows who the fuck wrote, and it's just very, but ask him about God, and he's like, I believe in him 100%. And it's because, if you're, hypothetically, if you're shooting somebody and they beg you to stop and you provide that mercy, believe it or not, God's there too, at that moment, and you walk away and the person doesn't die, and that person may be like, oh, I hate Latin Kings for the rest of my life, but you were provided mercy. You know, one more gunshot and you would have been dead, you know. So it's such a, this is why we don't belong to a big mainstream church. Because they would say none of what we're talking about is ministry, none of it is ordained. You know, immediately, without a doubt, you know. And that's why I really feel that we are that spectrum, you know, and you know, don't get upset if I think some of you might be a little bit further right than my mind frame, because I always believe that everybody is needed at the table from every perspective, because there's things that I'm not going to see ever that you might say, hey, but you didn't catch this over here, you know? And there's things that I'll see that you guys will never see coming, you know? And I think that's what I embrace about all of us here, is that we do come with all these different perspectives. But most of you are white, so you all kind of, you know, the plan comes through, I'm fucked.